we are Legally Sis. Welcome to our podcast.
The information provided in the show is for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. No attorney-client relationship is created between you and Duran Schultz Law.
Hi, we are Legally Sis. I'm Attorney March.
I'm Attorney Rons.
Welcome to our podcast. Previously, we've been discussing about the SEC, how to form a business, and recently the OPC or one-person corporation. But now, once you have been established and then you realize that your corporation is not the proper structure for you, for example, you have chosen to be an OPC and then you realize that you need a lot of investors and you have to split the shares. What is your option in being able to get more investors or partners in the corporation?
Okay. The OPC may convert into an ordinary stock corporation.
So there is an option under the
Yes. So for the conversion of an OPC, actually the SEC has issued Memorandum Circular 27, Series of 2020. This is in line with Articles 131 and 132 of the Revised Corporation Code. So basically, the guidelines or provisions provide what are the needed requirements in order to convert an one-person corporation to an ordinary stock corporation or vice versa, from an ordinary stock corporation to a one-person corporation. So this is maybe done by submitting an amended Articles of Incorporation, and once a conversion is approved, the newly converted company will become responsible for all the legal obligations of the previous company.
We'd like to emphasize to our viewers that the provision on the amendment does not only cover OPC to a corporation.
Yes.
With maybe 2, 3, or even 5 directors or owners. It can also cover, as you mentioned, the vice versa.
Yes.
You have a corporation with, say, 5 directors.
5 directors.
And then you realize you want it to be just one owner. And so you can convert that corporation, regular corporation, to an OPC. But this episode will just be solely discussing the OPC and being converted as to
Ordinary stock corporation.
Okay. So how about being converted into non-stock? Because you have been mentioning all about stock
Corporation. Actually, that's a good observation. If you read the provisions, it only mentions expressly the word stock corporation. So you cannot convert a non-stock OPC or a non-stock corporation to another type of structure. If you want to do it, you have to close down your non-stock corporation first, and then you can move forward to a new structure.
And I would say the purpose is actually also different.
Yes, actually, if you also check the requirements for conversion and under the Revised Corporation Code, they have mentioned the transfer of shares. So there's really nothing to transfer in a non-stock corporation.
Because a non-stock is meant to be not for profit.
Not for profit.
Generally, you're thinking of a foundation, a school, or anything that's not for profit charitable institution versus converting it into another corporation, if it's possible, but it's not here in our corporation code. So if you want to be converted from an OPC into a regular corporation, what are the things that you have to prepare, or what are the requirements?
Okay. A one-person corporation may be converted to an ordinary stock corporation if the single stockholder ceases to hold the shares solely for his own behalf. So you need at least 2 shareholders for this one. So we have what we call the transfer of shares. So the first stage will be processing the certificate authorizing registration before the BAR. Once you're done with that, you can move forward with the Securities and Exchange Commission by filing an amendment of Articles of Incorporation. But before this, you have the 60 days period. You have to give notice to the SEC that you intend to convert your OPC to an OSC. So don't be confused. OPC is one person. OSC, that's the term that they use, it's Ordinary Stock Corporation.
So it's not just simple changing the general information sheet.
Yes.
Putting different names.
There is a timeline for that. There are lists of requirements you have to comply, because failure to do so, you're at risk of violating the guidelines or the rules or laws imposed by the Revised Corporation Code.
So let's focus on the transfer of shares. So it essentially assumes that the one-person corporation is still alive.
Yes.
and is transferring to whoever they want or he wants to have it transferred to. So that means you said BIR. So what's this?
The certificate authorizing registration, this is an important requirement to submit it to the SEC. This signifies that the taxes for the transfer of shares have been paid and duly recorded before the BAR. So the SEC needs to have proof that there indeed happened a transfer of shares. You cannot just do this by indicating in your GIS that there's no new shareholders. They have to have substantiation or documentary requirement to show that indeed a transfer has been done.
Correct, because the form that you would be submitting anyways is an OPC, is an appointment form. It's not even a general information sheet. And now you have to file it online. So there is the temporary acceptance and the permanent acceptance. So even if you file it, it would definitely be reverted to you.
Correct.
It's the incorrect form. Okay. So when you're ready to amend your articles of incorporation, what are the things that should be indicated there?
Since it will be an ordinary stock corporation, the name, it has to be changed. So one of the requirements is a name reservation. So from OPC, you may either choose either Inc., Incorporated, or Corporation, but it will still be the same name. So for example, you have Lions and Legacy OPC, you will now become Lions and Legacy Incorporated, or Lions and Legacy Inc. It's up to you what will be the end name of the ordinary stock corporation. Aside from that, you will have to indicate the details of your shareholders, how many shares are held. You will need to indicate the number of directors, because in an OPC, you only have one. But now you need at least 2. That's a minimum. You can indicate 3 or 5. It's up to you. Aside from that, you would have to indicate how much has been paid out of the shares that has been transferred.
So if the SEC already approves your conversion, what happens to the old?
The articles of incorporation of the one-person corporation become superseded by the newly filed amended articles of incorporation. And once a certificate of incorporation is released, the date of approval will be the date of conversion. And from that date, the ordinary stock corporation becomes liable for all the obligations of the OPC.
Because the life of that corporation is not essentially cut.
Yes, it continues. And that's why, aside from the other requirements I've mentioned, you also need to submit an affidavit of undertaking to assume liability. You also need to submit an affidavit of undertaking to change name in case there will be an issue to the name that you will adopt.
What timeline are we looking at?
Okay, since there are 2 stages here, BAR and SEC. For the BAR, usually based on experience, the transfer of shares, it takes around 1 to 3 months. Because it will depend on the RDO where you will submit your requirements. For the SEC, since it is an amendment of Articles of Incorporation, the usual timeline will take 1 to 3 months also. It will depend if there are no bottlenecks in the conversion.
You mentioned about bottlenecks. What are these?
Okay, for bottlenecks, the number one that I have seen is if the signatory is outside the Philippines, you need to have the document signed outside to be in a apostille or consularized form, because if you submit it without having this kind of authentication, the government office will not accept it. Aside from that,
Fortunately, I remember previously the law firm has received a letter inquiring if this particular person really was here.
yeah,
Notarized by me.
from what I've heard, sometimes the SEC might ask for a proof of entry of the foreigner just to check if it was really notarized here in the Philippines.
Yes, because it's very common. Like, oh, can you just notarize it outside?
Yeah.
So strict.
You can take a shortcut, but it depends on you if you want to take that risk also.
Yes, exactly. Because it affects your articles of incorporation, the validity.
Yes.
The notarization is a mandatory or extraordinary.
Yes. Aside from the apostille, we also have the SEC monitoring clearance. This takes a while, and sometimes one of the compliance asked by the SEC is the submission of the latest audited financial statements. And this document takes a long time to be finished also. It depends on your on how you complete the requirements required by your auditor. So the longer you delay submission, the longer you delay the submission of your AFS, the longer will be the processing of your SEC also.
Yeah, any amendment with the SEC will trigger monitoring.
Yes.
It means you have to be in good standing. You'll have been filing for your reports. And if you haven't or you're not on time, then you pay for the penalties, unfortunately. It cascades from there. So if you are not filing on time, you pay penalties first. Or if you haven't filed, you file first.
You file first. Yeah.
Before you can proceed with the next steps under the amendment. So what's stopping the other owners from just establishing, say, a new corporation? Why would they want to still continue being an OPC and going through the hurdles of
Okay.
the requirements with the SEC and the BIR?
With the conversion, he don't technically stop the life or the business transactions of your OPC. There's a continuity. But if you're gonna set up a new company, it will become new registration, new process, new identity. So it will be separate from your OPC versus the new structure you want to set up as well.
Yeah, and because of that, there are a lot of legal implications.
Yes.
For example, your labor laws, right? Your employees.
Yes.
If you transfer one person to another company, how do you segregate it? Is it a resignation? Is
Yes.
it separation?
You have to think about the tenure of employees. You have to talk to them if they want to be transferred. There will be some internal discussions with your employees on how you're going to do this. So personally, conversion is still for me a good option, but it depends on how you foresee the changes you want to implement to your company.
Correct. Because if you have the financial muscle or the staff to continue having or maintaining two corporations, because if you still maintain but on a non-operation side, the OPC, you still have to file for your business permit, VIR forms, audited financial statement, because you didn't file it properly.
Correct.
Right? And then you have a second one, which is now a corporation. There are also tax implications to that. Are you going to wind down your OPC if you do not want to continue maintaining that OPC and not do the amendment or the conversion into a regular?
Actually, since you mentioned that if you want to have two business or two structure, it will be more costly. If you want to close down your OPC and then set up a new company, you'll have to think about the cost for retiring. And just to process closing down the business, it takes at least a year to finish because you have to go through all the government offices. But now it's backwards. So you have to start with the people or the barangay all the way to the SEC in order to close it.
So going to those other government agencies that you have to go through, once you have successfully secured your amendment, now you are an OSC. So how does it affect your filings with these other government agencies?
The filings will have to continue because you're still a corporation. But you have to go to the LGU, the BAR, and your statutories and update your name. Because you're no longer an OPC, you have to tell them that this is our new name, this is our new registration in order to avoid any confusion also with the registration.
Is that difficult?
Not really. The requirements are not that many, but processing wise, it might take a while depending. You also have to consider when you file it, there's a season to file. Well, this is my personal take because once it's the middle of the year also, I have just observed that the government takes some time to process.
Oh yeah, even for business permit, if you want to amend or update your name from OPC to OSC, if you are filing or asking for the change while the business permit renewal
happens.
they will just tell you we won't be processing it.
Yes.
You have to wait until the season is finished. So that means you are late for a couple of maybe weeks or even a month until the business permit and licensing office, the huge of work has been completed.
Yes. It may sound or look easy, but there are a lot of things you have to consider once you decide to convert your OPC.
Yeah, even the banks. How will the name affect your banking?
You also have to go to the bank. You have to submit your amended articles of incorporation, show your general information sheet, and say that this is the new company name. Can you please update our corporate bank account?
Yeah, and unfortunately with our banks, sometimes from the branch, they have to pass along the information to their head office, and it will take some time before they get back to you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you have a lot of transactions, who will be signing the checks and what would be the name under the check?
Yes. But don't worry about the requirements. You have us in case you want to convert. You may just approach us for any other questions. for the conversion of OPC to an ordinary stock corporation.
All right, that's about it. Thank you for listening.
Bye!